Hi, everyone. This is Aaron. Today is Wednesday, August 22nd, 2018. I'm recording from my home studio, and you are listening to the SoundWords podcast. I'm making several new changes to the podcast. The first is that I'm going to be very focused on making this a podcast about worship leading. The second is that it's going to go back to a free flowing conversation with very little editing. And the third thing is that I'm going to have a guest on the show. Today's guest is Angie Jodjana. We recorded this conversation about a week ago, and we're going to talk about different piano teachers leading versus performing, and her story of experiencing the most stage fright she's ever had. Guitar or piano? That is always the first question I want to ask you. What do you
Guitar or
prefer?
piano?
Because on Sunday you were playing guitar.
Yeah. I would have to say piano. Even though are we talking worship leading or just like as in like instrument of choice?
Good point. Okay, let's go worship leading first and then just straight up instrument of choice.
Ooh, okay. That's hard. I feel in terms of worship leading, I think the guitar is more versatile, so I would actually use it for worship leading more. Just because in terms of like, I feel like there's a lot of things you can do with it. Rhythmically, it's a little more, how do I say it? Just it kind of has more variety in terms of, like, you can play both fast and slow, and a guitar by itself tends to have more effect than a keyboard does by itself. However, as like an individual instrument, like between the two, I think I would always say piano, just because I've known it, I've played it for longer, and to me it's a lot more fun being able to kind of see really in front of you, whereas guitar, it's like you kind of have to like look down to the side to figure out what you're doing. But yeah, so
You're
worshiping,
like,
I think guitar.
yeah, you're like a unique worship leader for a variety of reasons. But I mean, one reason is because you're actually like a teacher too. You know, you're not just like, oh yeah, like this is what I do for fun. No, like you actually teach people how to play music and how to lead worship. So like, do you ever like do something on stage where you're like, oh, I probably shouldn't do that because I tell my students not to do that, but I did it anyways?
There are definitely moments where I catch myself, or just in general, even while I'm in the middle of a lesson, I tell my students something. I'm like, I always kind of have to take a step back and be in my head and be like, do I do that? Like, if I'm expecting them to do that, I need to make sure that I do that. It's rare to think of that while I'm leading, I feel, because, I mean, there's so much going on when you're on stage, and there's kind of like a lot more at stake, like in the moment. So it's like teaching and like thinking of my students the last thing on my mind when I'm worship leading, but definitely in the setting of a lesson, I'm always like, like, do I actually do that? Am I being hypocritical by not doing it and telling them to do it? So, yeah.
Do you think that
That
do you think you're a mean teacher?
No, I am definitely not. Um, I feel I'm quite nice to my students, and but there are moments where I do have to pull on a tough face and be like, no, you need to behave, and you need to. I've had to give the stern talk of, you need to practice, or else you're wasting my time, and you're wasting your time and your parents' money. So I've had to give that talk a couple times, but
Man,
other than that, I'd say I'm pretty easygoing, and I don't. Yeah.
I remember that talk. I had that talk from my piano teacher. I was like, I think I was elementary school, and like I was trying to play a whole new world, you know, from Aladdin. And like,
Uh-huh.
there's like this one part, I don't know, it must be the bridge or something where there's like a key change. And like,
Right.
I didn't care. Like, I was like, I'm not gonna practice this. I'm just gonna show up and try to do it. And I remember like, I think we were like working on that part for like a month. And then my teacher was just like, okay, we're not gonna play this song anymore until you go home and practice this. And I was like, oh, okay.
Oh my god.
But the sad thing is that I don't think I ever resolved that. I think I just said okay, and then we just moved on to the next song.
Oh my god.
Did you ever not practice and get in trouble?
Yeah, well, it's funny because in high school I was convinced that I was going to be a singer and that voice would be my only thing. And so I kind of stopped practicing piano after like sophomore year. I mean, I still took lessons, and by my teacher's grace and by my parents' grace, like they still kind of kept me in and like forced me to stick with it. But there was a point where I just wasn't practicing. I would come into my lesson and just straight up tell my teacher, like, I haven't done anything, like, just so you know. And she would still like force me to sit down and like work through something. So I guess I don't think I've ever gotten like in trouble. Anytime it'd be like, oh, I didn't practice that much this week. I'm only remembering instances from when I was like in junior high and high school. I switched around so many teachers in elementary school that it's hard to remember, but I finally settled with one teacher, I think maybe in like 5th or 6th grade. And I was with that teacher for maybe about 5 years, and I switched teachers finishing up high school. And anytime that happened, it was always just like, okay, well, let's see what we can do. Even now, sometimes it's like, I go to my lesson, like, I didn't really get this, and I didn't really practice, and it's been overwhelming me because of midterms, and my teacher is still very gracious. She's like, okay, well, let's see, we can read through something, or there's always something to work on. But I think as kids, it's really important. I don't remember getting in trouble. I think because my parents always forced me to practice, so I did practice.
How come you switched around with so many teachers? I only had like maybe 2 or 3 piano teachers. Like
growing up.
Yeah. How come you switched through so many piano teachers?
Well, so if I remember correctly, my very first private piano teacher. So I actually started taking piano in group lessons because that's just how the Yamaha system works.
Yeah, I did Yamaha too. Yeah.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, solfege and everything.
Yeah, so I had one teacher for, I actually don't know how long I was with her. She's this Russian lady, and I think she basically quit her job at Yamaha to go to Europe and like continue performing there or something.
Oh, wow.
And then so I just kind of switched around a lot of teachers per recommendation of like the director of the school, who was my group class teacher at one point, and at one point she was also my private teacher. I went through, let's see, of the ones that I remember, maybe like 3 or 4 teachers before I finally settled with one teacher in like 5th grade. And so I think it's because I was young too, so it's like, oh, she has time, and like, but I don't know if there's an exact reason why, other than some teachers left. One of my teachers, I think after I left her, like got injured. Things happen. So yeah.
So it's more like, oh, stuff happens in their lives, and then
I think
you
so.
find
Yeah,
teacher.
and then the students are forced to accommodate.
Right.
So.
Yeah. Okay, man. So like, you said that you out of high school you were just gonna do voice only, and then you said, oh, I'm gonna do piano and voice. So what's the story behind that? Why the switch?
Well, okay. So I applied to all of my colleges as a vocal performance major, thinking that I was going to be a singer because for the longest time I wanted to do musical theater. I wanted to be on Broadway, and I knew the vocal training obviously would like get me there. So when it came down to my last 2 schools, so I was deciding between Chapman and then University of the Pacific, because and I almost went to UOP because I wanted to pursue vocal performance as well as music therapy, but it would have taken me 5 years, and they didn't guarantee that my scholarship was going to carry over. And so there was all this certainty because I'd visited Chapman and I shadowed someone there, and I was like, I really like this place. Like, I don't know what it is, but like, I really love to go here. But I thought it was maybe me like being superficial, like, oh, the campus is pretty, and I was like, oh, UOP, there's so much like educational value. And but then we found out that I actually had gotten more scholarship money from Chapman than I anticipated. And so I think that was kind of like our sign from God, like, okay, Chapman is where I'm going.
Okay.
And coming there, since I was only going to do vocal performance, my parents were kind of like, maybe since you had this double major plan at UOP, you might want to consider pursuing something else. And I think my piano teacher at the time had been pushing for me to look into collaborative piano, because she was like, in her eyes, it was that she felt I had all this potential and that I was going to just let it all drop when I got to school. And she was like, I don't want you to do that. I think you should really look into this. And so my mom told me, like, yeah, why don't you give it a try? And so I met with, in May of my senior year, I met with the my current piano teacher, who's the head of the KCA, the Keyboard Collaborative Arts Department, and had a good talk. I played a couple pieces for her, and she was like, "Yeah, we'd love to have you." And so it's kind of how it all started. But,
nice. So it was like you were encouraged then, basically, by your teacher.
Yeah, sort of.
That's
It
awesome.
wasn't like I dreamt something. It was like, oh, pursue piano too. It was kind of like I was moved that way, but I'm really thankful that it happened.
I think it sounds like a good move to me. I mean, I don't know anything, but yeah, I mean, that sounds right up your alley. Okay, so what do you feel is your stronger suit, like your voice or your piano playing? And I guess I'm asking, like, what do you feel you're just more naturally like, okay, yeah, this is like I'm more natural at this versus like, oh, I actually need to like work to refine this?
Between the two, that's hard. If we're talking classical stuff, like what I do at school, both are equally difficult in the sense where, for piano, I think a lot of times, because it's a very physical thing. I see everything in front of me and it seems like it should be so simple. But when like my hands aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing, I get really frustrated because it's like, what you're supposed to do. Like, why can't you do it? And then with voice, it's hard also because it's an internal mechanism. You don't see any of it and it's all by feeling. And it's just like, for me, it was very, like my first couple of years were very frustrating, because my teacher was trying to push me to do all these things. And I was like, I feel like I know what I should be doing, but I just can't sit right yet. Like, I don't know what's going on. It really wasn't until this past year that things finally started clicking. And I was like, oh my gosh, I get it. And so I think, so that, and in the classical area, I think both, I'd say like, it's kind of like both have an equal hand in terms of like things that do come naturally. Expressivity in both areas comes naturally. It's the technical issues that are always, that have always been the difficult part and also the most frustrating part. For worship and like improvisation and stuff.
Yeah.
I'd feel that's hard too.
You're too hard on yourself, Angie.
I think I have to say, when it comes to worship music, probably piano comes more easily just because it's so freeing for me to not have to like, other than like the letters that are on the page and like the rhythm of the song, that's all you're really bound to, and anything else you could just do. So anything flies for the most part. And so I think, yeah, to that end, singing, I mean, it's the same challenges in like the stuff I do classically. Like you have to deal with issues with range and like, in terms of like balance and like harmony and tone, depending on who you're working with. Yeah, but I think if we're talking the context of like church music, I think piano would, it's hard to say because I started off being involved in like worship as a singer.
Yeah, right.
So I can't deny those roots. But I mean, I started playing with you in junior high as a pianist.
Yes,
so,
yes.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember, like, was that like back in the bungalows still?
It was back in the bungalows. Yeah.
And like
I
what?
was in 8th grade.
You were singing in 8th grade, or you were playing piano? You said playing piano in 8th grade?
Yeah, for you and your team, yeah.
Who else was on team? Like Philip? John Soon?
It was like everyone. I
really?
remember that first practice. I had just, what were we? I don't remember, but I remember you were like, "Hey, Angie's like, come up here and like, like sing." I think like basically asked me to sing something, and like it was like, "I will offer up my life."
Okay, yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah.
Yeah, and oh man, who was there? I think Phil was there. It was like everyone from class of 2011. So
okay.
Like Ben, Grace, and
oh, for sure, yeah.
Yeah, some other whoever else was playing with us at the time. So we had a big team back in the day.
Yeah. Yeah. Man, I'm glad you remember that. Those memories, man. Those are treasures. You know, the funny thing is that like you can speak both like worship music language and classical music language, you know, and not a lot of church musicians can do that, you know, and I think that a lot of church musicians just don't have that training, you know, like even for me, like I took piano lessons, you know, but like I was never really into like classical stuff, you know. And so like what would you tell like, I don't know, I guess, the students these days, like if they don't like classical music, because I think there's
Mhm.
obviously stuff that you can learn from it, and that can help
Yeah.
you. Like what do you tell your students? Because you guys still have to do that stuff, right?
Yeah, well, a lot of my students right now are beginners, so they're still learning basics, at least currently, like in the summer.
Mm.
And I have some who strictly do classical music, and there are some who kind of want to venture into a little bit more like chords and like jazz and stuff. And so um, it's hard for me to kind of relate it back to church music and to that end because it's like they're still learning and there's still things that they're picking up on. Um, yeah, but I mean, honestly, I feel like with my kids who come to me and they are like, oh, I just want to learn how to play like worship songs and like chords and stuff, but they don't have that classical background yet. Um, Usually I kind of just tell them it's a lot of trial and error because that's what it was for me. Like, even though I had like all that, I did like have all these years of training, but um, then again, if I didn't know what a scale was, I probably wouldn't be able to do like half the things I know now.
No,
And
for
so,
sure. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, for people who don't like classical music, you don't have to listen to it to be good at worship music, but there has to be a foundation for you to be exceptional in like things that you do.
I
So
agree. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
It helps to learn it for sure.
yeah,
Yeah. Okay, so you led this Sunday with your dad and team. It was
yeah,
good. It was really good. And I noticed that you guys did Living Hope, which is
yeah.
a song that we're currently recording, or I guess you recorded it and I'm currently working on
Yeah.
it. The funny thing is that Philip told me one time that he enjoys that song a lot better now after he heard like your recording of it. So
No way.
yeah, 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 yeah. Like I guess he helped with the harmonies on top of it. So I think
Right.
yeah, I'm
Yeah.
still working on it. But I guess my question for you is,
Mhm.
when you were leading that song on Sunday,
Yeah.
I know you were like holding back, right? I know you were because I have the recording of you for the recorded version, where you're belting it, you're doing your riffs, you know,
Yeah.
and so like how do you find that balance? I guess I want to know what goes through your mind, where
Mm.
because Angie, I know you're capable of doing it, but obviously, like you're not trying to like get glory for yourself, but what goes through your head, like where do you find that balance between like tastefulness, and
Mhm.
like being able to, use all your skills, for God's glory, of course, and not being like showboaty, like how do you deal with that?
Um, well, okay. It's a very fine line, honestly. Well, in terms of specifically yesterday, we sang that song a whole step higher than the recording that we did.
I
So
did
it was a
notice that,
lot
yeah.
higher. So I was having more difficulty vocally. But I think in terms of like, I guess finding that balance between like tastefulness, as you say, um, for me, I think what it comes down to is, huh, like you don't want to go. I think there's a time and place for everything. Specifically in the middle of a service when, and especially when you're singing about something that is so meaningful, like, this is Jesus Christ who is literally living and he is our hope. And I think when emphasis should be put on those words as opposed to, things that I'm vocally capable of doing. I don't think people need to see that. If it was like a concert I was hosting for myself, maybe. Well, actually, yeah,
Yeah,
probably.
of course, yeah.
But um, but the fact is, I guess like whatever. It's a fine line because I think there are some people who find that like God glorifying, like, oh, she's using, or like he or she is using their gifts and their capabilities to, glorify God. But to me, I think just allowing the song to speak for itself and just to kind of like simply put it out there and um, like as it is. I think sometimes that can be like more meaningful.
Mm.
And yeah, I mean, as a worship leader, I have had my moments of like where I slightly like alter the melody just a little bit. If it's like a repeat of a chorus or something, usually I'll do something the second time. But normally I try and kind of keep things as they are as much as I can, not to distract the congregation, and to also, as a leader, like, you're kind of setting the example, so to speak, right? So you want to give the congregation like a clear direction of like where we're going. And yeah, so if that makes sense at
No,
all.
yeah, that's really good actually. I think you made a good point where like, yeah, the song was like in kind of a unique spot in the set. I think that was like what the song after the announcements, right? So it was like the song
Yeah,
like right before the message, like
yeah,
I guess we're trying to like prepare our hearts, to hear the word,
yeah,
and
yeah,
you're
yeah, yeah,
absolutely right. Like that, yeah, that doesn't seem like the right place to need to do something like that, like this seems more like a preparation, more like a, let's calm down a little bit type of deal. So yeah, no,
yeah.
I hear you on that. That's really smart actually. That's really wise to be aware of like where the song is in the set.
Mm-hmm.
When you were playing, um
Mm-hmm.
you were playing guitar and you
Yeah,
guys also had piano and keyboard
yeah.
on your team, right? And
Mm-hmm.
do you ever like think that like, oh, okay, like these other instruments, like they're doing something, but like you wouldn't do it that way, like
Oh,
because
like other players.
yeah,
Oh, like while
because
I'm
like,
playing simultaneously, or when I'm watching like other keyboardists, or
oh well, I
yeah.
meant simultaneously, but I guess we can do
Oh,
both. Yeah, we can talk about
simultaneously.
both. Yeah, sure. Yeah, like I mean, obviously you guys practiced as a team before,
Right.
but like
Yeah.
how do you like, like people have their own tastes and preferences too. Sometimes there is no like right way to play something, but like how do
Mm-hmm.
you how do you just be like flexible with like what other people do when you play that same instrument too?
Usually, I mean, I just kind of listen. It's like, oh, okay, like I'll take it for what it is, and every person has their own style of playing.
Mm.
Some people tend to like play it safe and stick to like what they know is like within the triad or nearby. Other people like kind of go like ham and stuff. I'm usually kind of the one who goes ham just for fun because I'm bored. And
No, it's good. I like that. Yeah, I
yeah,
appreciate that.
but I mean, it doesn't usually bother me unless I feel like unless there is like a moment in a song where the piano is kind of like one of the only things you hear and they're not doing much. That bugs me sometimes because it's
Really.
like, you could totally fill the space right now. Like, why aren't you? But that didn't really happen yesterday. That happened another time. I was at another church and I was
Mm,
watching like the keyboardists, and
mm.
yeah, there was a moment where I was like, oh, there could have been like, you could have done something there, and like, yeah, but I mean, like, other than that, like, I try not to let judgments go through my head. It's like, I'm supposed to be worshiping, and like, like, this is not the time and place for a critique, like, inwardly. So,
No, you're right. See, that perspective is something I'm always needing to work on. Just kind of like, dude, Aaron, just stop being a critic and just like worship. Like don't be that guy. Nobody wants to be that guy. We're all just trying to worship God here.
yeah,
The humbling thing about FCBC is that like, we're not, I don't think any of us are really trying to like show off or be, a
right,
superstar or anything. I
yeah, yeah,
appreciate that
yeah,
about
yeah.
our church. You're still leading in turf, right?
Yes, I am. Yeah.
Okay. And like the I think you said this earlier, like the atmosphere in turf is really small, right? And so like
Mhm.
do you enjoy that? Do you enjoy the smaller atmospheres versus like, being on stage with all the lights and stuff?
Mhm. I'd have to say yes by far.
By far.
Um,
Oh, explain.
yeah, um, I think it's partially because it might be like selfish of me to say, but like in that sense, because it's smaller, there's like less pressure.
I
But
think that's
also,
fair. Yeah, that's fair.
I think there's so much more intimacy when, even like, I've been listening to a lot of Silicum has a couple of recordings of him doing just like acoustic sessions, like, or acoustic concerts basically, and all it is just like him with an acoustic guitar and a bunch, like a huge audience, and they're just singing out loud to all these songs, and it's like, wow, it's like, it's so simple but it's so moving. And so I've taken a lot from that, and I think also in turf, like because the room is smaller, like obviously everyone's a little more cramped in, and so the sound, like when the people sing out, is a lot louder. And it's as a worship leader, that's so encouraging that like I get to bring these people before the Lord and to be able to sing along with them and to praise Him. And so I think I do enjoy smaller settings better. Obviously, there is a big need for the Sunday morning big stuff, right? But between the two, I would take a smaller session any day, I
Wow.
think.
Were you
Yeah.
always like that?
Um, I don't know. I feel I'm not sure. I never really thought about it until recently, I
When
think.
turf was just, oh yeah,
Yeah, I think
like
so. Like when I started leading in turf, I think like every time I just go in, I'm like, oh, this is so much better. It's like, um, yeah, but yeah, I guess between I don't know. Like I can do the Sunday stuff. I don't get like I do get nervous, but I don't get like crazy stage fright. So that I think that helps like work to my advantage when I'm like playing or helping with worship. But um yeah, I mean I don't know if I was like that before. I think
yeah.
as a kid, like I did enjoy the stage, and it really was in college that it's been like a humbling process of learning to, I guess, like not like want to just have it all for myself and to allow God to work through me and to yeah. So um I think that's yeah, I think
No,
that's a
that's
part of why my perspective might have changed, but I'm not really sure. I never really thought about it much as a
no, that's really
kid.
deep actually. That's super deep. In college you said that your perspective changed. That's
Yeah.
amazing. No, I think that's really good. I think that's really good. And I think, perspective is something that we need to, I think, be aware of, as worship leaders, because like we see things totally differently than like the congregation sees things, and
Yeah.
I think that we see things differently than the pastors see things too, because oftentimes the pastors might not see things as musically as we do.
Right.
I
Yeah.
think
Yeah. Yeah.
I think being able to see the different perspectives, and also of course the perspective of like, oh, we're just worshiping God. I
Mhm.
think that's super important in terms of being able to serve the people, work well with your pastor, and yeah, just be a good worship leader. That's really good. Thanks for sharing that, Angie. Yeah, and I think, yeah, we're all growing too. Like I don't think we're
Yeah.
ever gonna like make it as worship leaders.
No, never. Yeah.
Yeah, no. Thanks for that. Okay. You said that you've been on stage since a young age or whatever. What's like the most like stage fright you've ever had in your life?
Stage fright. Oh, I can't. I mean, there's been um like at school, there's definitely been a lot of instances just because like I never felt super solid, especially my first couple of years, because I didn't feel solid in my technique. And I was like, everyone's so much better than me. And like, even though like our teacher always placed an emphasis on like nobody's perfect and we're all working and we're all going to encourage each other to keep working and growing. And even though I knew that, I was always so nervous. So I don't know if there's ever been like one specific moment of like huge stage fright. There have definitely been like I've definitely been nervous. I
But
don't know.
school over church atmospheres for sure.
I think so. Yeah, I think just because it's like in school, it's like everyone around me and everyone I'm close to is doing this, and so you feel like you have to make an impression, and like your friends are watching you, and like your teachers are watching you, and it's like, oh my gosh. Oh wait, actually, no, there was a really big moment last year. Sorry, now that
Let's
I'm
hear
thinking
it.
about
Let's
this.
hear it.
Yeah, I did. I'm not one for competitions just because like in when I was younger and I did them, I was competing in like hard categories. So I like never got anything ever. And until like my senior year of high school, like I finally like won second place at this one thing. But last year I did this concerto competition at school. A concerto is basically, you might know this. It's this huge piece that's supposed to be meant for a single orchestra. Single instrument and orchestra.
Sure.
A lot that goes into it in terms. It's a long piece. I think mine was like 12 minutes long. And like I mean, you have breaks, but it's essentially like straight playing through, and it's usually all this crazy virtuosic stuff. And it took me like, I think I spent some of the summer learning it, as well as like all of the fall semester leading up to that competition day. It was so bad. It was like a Wednesday midweek, and I was the last person to go. Like, are you kidding me? And like, so, but it was extremely nerve wracking, like, because I knew all my friends in the room, and like I was aware of who some of the judges were, and like,
wow.
Even though I had my teacher by my side, like playing the orchestral part and piano for me, it was still like, oh, it was just it's probably the most nervous I'd been in a while. And so, yeah, that's probably one of the biggest instances as of late.
Man, thanks for sharing that. It's good to hear that even Angie gets nervous sometimes too.
Dude, I get nervous all the time, I promise you. Might not seem like it at church, but I definitely do.
Man, well, I'm glad that. Thanks for doing this, Angie. It's good to hear kind of a more personal side from you, I guess. Yeah. Okay, last question. What have you been listening to recently? I know you said the Phil Wickham acoustic stuff, but what else do you listen to?
Is it music?
Yeah, yeah. It doesn't have to be worship music. It could be anything.
Okay. Well, oh man, what have I been listening to? I know one of my more recent discoveries was I was told about Pat Barrett, who is, I believe, like one of the lead songwriters or singers of House Fires. He came out with his own album. That was like one of the last things I listened to that I remember. I've also, what else? Oh my gosh. I could like go through my Spotify right now, but I think that would end the call. What else have I been listening to? Oh, I like, honestly, Aaron, I get bored of music so fast. So I just like go through a bunch of stuff. And there was like this summer rewind thing option that Spotify has, and so it like goes back through all of your summers and like picks out songs that you were listening to.
Yeah.
So that's been filled with like, last year I was on this huge like musical like rampage, and so there's a bunch of that in there. There's a bunch of One Direction from angsty high school me, and
that's great,
amongst like other things. So yeah, that's kind of what I've been listening to.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks, Angie. Thanks for doing this.
Yeah, no problem. I had a lot of fun. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, of course. Thanks, Angie, for being my guest on the show, and thank you, everyone, for listening. This is season 3 of the SoundWords podcast, and I'm going for a more produced feel. So please send me your feedback or questions for follow-up. You can even send me any questions specifically for Angie to follow up on, and I'll be sure to get to them in the next few episodes. In the show notes, you'll find links to our podcast archive. And don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube, Spotify, or your favorite podcast player. My website is musicgoon.com. The email address for this podcast is soundwords@musicgoon.com. And you can always tweet me @musicgoon. Thanks. See you soon.